Family. You know what time it is? It's 8 o'clock. It's Thursday. Guess what that means? Y'all gonna know it's time to talk. Welcome. As always, I appreciate you all for making this happen, being here with me tonight, and just keeping this conversation going about the different things that are happening in our industry. And it's been enlightening to hear everybody's take on all of the subjects that we've been talking about: AI, burnout, quiet quitting. But I wanted to try to change the mood today, and that starts because of my sponsors, RST Automation. I know y'all seen it. The AIM tray system, the peel pack system. Definitely check them out. Let them see what they could do for you. Big shout out to my other sponsors, Calzura, IMP, Pure Processing, everybody that's been here to make this happen for me. Again, I thank you and I thank you. But most of all, I couldn't do this without the people that are actually here watching. So I thank you again for being here. It's all about what I say, right? Time to talk. What they didn't tell me. Still available, all platforms. Make sure you get your copy. Y'all know what's happening in about, I think it's about 10 days, right? Vegas, here we come. The conference is upon us. Definitely, if you are going, make sure you find me. I will be there in the room. And on that note, I just wanted to thank everybody who has signed up to take part of Hey, my son there, K-Line. How are you, sir? Take part of the show that I'm doing with Hank, Garrett, Mike, Hidden Risk, Unseen Contaminants in Patient Positioners. It is sold out in just a day. I think it was a day. It sold out. Definitely appreciate everybody coming through to see that. Yeah, just a wonderful time to be had by all. But in that, I'm saying this. Think about, we go through our day to day and you see certain things and it's like, oh, I could do that better. Or, oh, well, if only I had done this. What do you do with those ideas? Do you let them go to the wayside, or do you actually act on them? What do innovation mean to you? What does, hey, if only in sterile processing we did this? I know those are legitimate thoughts that we all have just by something that we've used, a piece of equipment that you've seen and said, this design is terrible. If they had only did this, we all have done it. Even if it's an instrument or a piece of equipment, you've said to yourself, I would have made this a different way. Those ideas, when they happen, do you just let them go? Or do you say, I wonder if I can make this? Some of us have these ideas and don't know where to start. So some of that is where this conversation will go today. What happened that you had the opportunity to do something to improve the industry and you acted on it? I want to know what that answer is. Definitely chat, hit me up with your ideas. Let us talk about some of this stuff, because this is how we get the industry moving forward. This is how we change the game. When speaking of changing the game, I was at a conference and I was doing the vendor walk and I saw something that got my attention. The lady that was behind the table said, come on over, let's talk about this. Showed me something and it absolutely blew me away. And I said to myself, this is stuff that people need to talk about. These are the things that people need to see, because this would be a game changer for so many of us when it hits the market and it's out here for us to test out, see, and, just experience. So, and as I always do, I'm thinking about what can I do for this season? What can I do? I asked her, like, hey, do you think that, the company would be interested in coming on and talking about it? She said, of course. I said, all right. That time has come. I want to introduce you to Zuno Medical. Innovative, outside the box, because I didn't see this coming. Smart container. Did you hear what I said there? Smart container. And I know we're all thinking to ourselves, what does that mean? If you haven't seen this, it is going to be something that you take back to your departments and you're going to sit and ponder about it and like, why didn't I think of that? Or maybe you did and didn't act on it, but he did. So today we're going to talk to Miss Aerienne Cunningham and Mr. Allan McNichol. Can you invite them and warm welcome to the platform today so we can have this robust conversation behind the smart container? Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are y'all doing?
Doing great, Kenneth. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
You know, after meeting you and actually seeing and, wanting to know more, I said, you know what? Today's the day. So we are here. But because I've met y'all and talked to y'all, how can we get, not even how can we get, can y'all tell the people a little bit more about each of you and what you bring to this, what Zuno is?
Aerienne, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So just a brief introduction of myself. So VP of Marketing for Zuno Medical. My background is in medical devices. I have spent my entire career in this field, specifically about 8 years in sterile containment directly. And so, and with sterile processing. And so when I first saw this container, for me, I knew that it was going to be a game changer. I knew it was something that I needed to be a part of. And when Allan called me a couple of years ago to tell me that, the FDA de novo clearance was received, it was just earth shattering on my end, and knew that I needed to be a part of this launch. So very excited to be able to share the technology with you. It's something I think that is, definitely surpassed all of my expectations. And it's great to see the feedback and of course, even, interacting with you at conferences. So very excited to show it today.
Okay. Allan, sir.
So I don't have Aerienne's background in the healthcare industry on that side. I've had 30 years in tech and have launched a lot of different types of products and developed a lot of products to bring them to market. I was approached by the two co-founders who were both medical device sales guys for two of the major OEMs. And they had kind of conceived of it because of frequently running into challenges where they were bringing sets in ready to do a procedure and then, seeing something that happened. So I think we're feeling like a little bit what you were talking, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be something different that we can do within that. But they're not engineers. They hadn't launched new products. And after a time, they kind of were looking for a CEO. So I happened to have be connected through a managing director of a venture capital fund that we both knew. And I started learning about autoclaves and steam sterilization and the OR and all the things within that. And I've run thousands of autoclave cycles later.
Right.
And really have a good understanding of it. We're very passionate about the change and the difference that our smart containers can make. So it's been a wonderful and fun journey, and we're really excited to be bringing these to market.
Now, before I get deep into this, I heard a rumor, and I just want to confirm. I heard a rumor that when this was being conceptualized, there was a sterilizer purchased and it was in a garage to start the testing on this.
That is absolutely true. So when we were doing our early, we're in Silicon Valley, right? And you do startups in the garage in Silicon Valley. That's kind of the way it works out. But we were trying to keep our costs low while we were still early in the development stages. And so my CTO, Chris Fieser, who's got, fortunately, a couple of decades of bringing new medical device products to market, we were working out of his garage. So we needed an autoclave to be able to run cycles. So we upgraded his electrical. We upgraded, water and drainage and all that stuff. And we had an autoclave for 3 years sitting in his garage, running a whole bunch of cycles. So,
so I don't know.
We've been out of the garage for a while, though, Kenneth. I do want to make sure everybody knows that we're not still in the garage.
That would be good to know for people.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you remember this, but about 4 years ago, I was at a facility in California, San Jose to be exact. It was around when I guess COVID had hit and things had slowed down.
Sure.
I was approached by a gentleman and said, "Hey, I have this friend who, this new thing is going to be happening, but it has to be, you can't tell nobody about it. It's because it's still in development and everything." And I said, "Okay, I'm interested." He said he wants to come and actually put it in a sterilizer and let us see what happens. Sir, I was that gentleman that you came to.
Oh, okay. The San Jose region. Is that San Jose
Regional Medical Center?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So these years later is actually, and as soon as she would tell you, like when I walked up to the table, I was like, wait a minute, I know this. I know what this is. But it was good to see that even from then to now, it didn't die out. It did. It came now. Yeah, it came and it was full circle that I got to see the I guess the prototype version to now it's done.
Yeah.
So that was actually like, oh, okay. So he had an idea, they went forward, and now it's here. So I was like, very interested in that. But the reason we're here today, innovation in healthcare, right? We see something we want to improve and somebody has an idea. You said like his thought was, when you're bringing trays in and something happens and it's not ready. How does the smart container change that?
Yeah, well, I think one of the challenges, right? Really, there's two ways to contain something when it's out of this, coming in. When you put it in the sterilizer and keep that barrier around it that's going to, and that's really a standard rigid sterilization container that uses polypropylene filters, and even the cabinets still fit into that, that type of set. So they have big polypropylene filters. If you're looking at, something like SteriCube or Turbot Surgical, right? Yes. But they're a bigger box, but they're still very similar to that. There's mechanical actuated retention plates and things of that nature, which often wear over time. Difficult to tell when they may or may not be working as well as what they had. And there's a lot of prep to be able to get those ready. Obviously, Blue Wrap's been, the foundation for a long time as well. And there's an art and a probably half art, half science to wrapping containers. And there tends to be, in my mind, a lot of things that can go wrong. And especially if you've got somebody new, we all know that turnover, I heard you talking about, the quiet quitting and some of the burnout and some of those things. I really feel for sterile processing technicians because they're under immense pressure. And you mentioned healthcare innovation, you see healthcare innovation, but you don't, in the sterile barrier and sterile containment really hasn't been a lot of innovation in the last 40 years. And so we were looking at how do we, and even back to the original co-founders, it was about how do you get rid of the porous barrier? How do you get rid of that polypropylene and have something that where you for certain, there isn't any guesses, there isn't finding out in the OR, for certain that set that has been behind a good set sterile barrier and it's going to go into the OR and there's going to be no surprises. You want to know that you can prep that in seconds and it's kind of foolproof. You're not going to run into areas where, potentially there's a lot of opportunity for human error where something could go wrong and then potentially not found out until those sets go into the OR. And so that was really the big thing is just how do we simplify that whole prep process? How do we eliminate some of the cooling time and some of those other things by removing those porous barriers? And how do we give absolute certainty that when it goes into the OR, it's going to be ready to use?
CS Assist just said that, just so you said, CS Assist just said that processors are under immense pressure. And that's, like you said, when you're bringing sets in and you're trying to make sure everything's right. And just because it's a loaner set and getting that stuff ready for surgery, that pressure can be overwhelming sometimes. And you're thinking about all the things you just said, like, hey, the barrier, did I get the filters in? Did I do so all of that little stuff does add up to, did I do it right? And questioning and the OR having a part and say it. So that does make a difference. So I'm curious to get to what that trade, we're going to get there, but how does that get solved in this process? So yes, what were you going to say, Aerienne?
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, and just speaking of pressures, it's right now, I mean, currently with the porous barriers, it's a subjective test. So you're either holding the blue wrap up to the light and you're checking, are there holes? Is there a hole, right? And it's up to that individual person. It's very subjective. It's not black and white. How big is it? Does it go all the way through, right? Or you have filters, for example, that you're checking. So to have it with 100% certainty, know that a sterile barrier has or has not been compromised. I mean, you're relying on the individual to be able to make that decision rather than a very clear, green check mark and red X in this case, check. So it eliminates a lot of that guesswork, and going back to that pressure removes that from all users by giving you a verifiable. And so, anyways, going back to the innovation,
I was gonna get there later, but since you started, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. So I did some research and I was looking, right. So for normal processing right now, it says on your site that the normal processing has about 8 steps in there. If we're just talking about the circle of a tray, we talked, it's from packaging prep, sterilization, autoclave cooling, subjective barrier check, the surgical procedure, decon, and then process starts over. So tell me how it gets cut down to 5 steps with your container. Like I saw where I'll start with the first one, packaging and prep. On a normal time, it says that that's about 5 to 10 minutes. But with the Zuno container, it gets cut down to 10 seconds. What does that mean?
Let me just show you, first off, Kenneth, I think would be easier. So I'm gonna drop down to the container. If you can see,
everybody, there it is. That's the smart container. There it goes. We finally see it. We see it. Here it is.
So these are electromechanical valves right here. They don't need filters, kind of nothing that. I'm going to show you how those work. And this is what we call our control module. So the control module has 2 pretty simple buttons. One under status, and that's going to really tell you what the sterile barrier status. Do I have a good seal or not? This is the one I'm going to show you, the prep. So I can show you that it displays a red X. It's not a sealed container. I've got one next to me that is sealed. I'm going to show you that too. And then a second check is to just flip up this with one finger, and you can see how easy it is to flip. You're going to see when I show you the sealed one, not so easy. Okay. So your sets come in, and you've got, whether it's Zimmer, DePuy, Stryker, what have you, you're dropping the set in. You do drop the chemical indicators in as well. That is, part of the ST79 process. We're not trying to change that, in any way. And so, but then you're just literally latching it, lifting up the valves, and pressing the button. Now, I'm not going to press the button because I want you to show you if I forgot to lift a valve. I'm going to tip that up so you can see it. And I press the ready button. You can see it's actually pointing to the valve that I need to lift up.
Okay.
So if I lift that valve up now, that blue light flashes.
Okay.
So that's saying it's ready. I could accidentally drop another one. You can see that arrow pops up again. I lift it back up. I get the ready light. So all I have to do when I'm looking at a cart with Zuno smart containers is look across and make sure I've got blue ready lights flashing. That means I'm good to go, ready to go in. What this is doing right now, Kenneth, is it starts to look for elevated temperature to know that it's in an autoclave cycle. So it can track pre-vac. It can track sterilization regardless if you might be doing an 8-minute sterilization instead of a 4 or something of that nature. It's going to track all of that, track the drying cycle. And it's the drying cycle that we're leveraging to create a verifiable vacuum seal. So what happens at that point is at the end of the drying cycle, we're basically neutralizing these magnetic valves, and they will drop, and then that's what creates a verifiable vacuum seal. I'm gonna put that one to the side and show you that now I've got this one. This is how it would come out. It'll actually flash the status indicator when it comes out of the sterilizer. So you don't have to wait to know, don't have to find out in the OR. You'll know the moment you're pulling a load out of the sterilizer if something for some reason didn't create a successful sealed container. So it would flash a red X instead of that green check mark. Now, so you've got time savings in prep, but a big area where the time savings comes in now, and I'll stop and not just looking at the container, is we don't have a porous barrier. So we don't have to wait. There isn't a potential to have moisture wick through a porous barrier and create a conduit for bacteria. So if you're running a load that has Zuno containers, let's say your loaner sets, right? You bring your loaner sets in and you're throwing these loaner sets and they come out, they're all green check marks. You can immediately take those with gloves, obviously, because they're going to be hot, to a different area to cool and load the autoclave right away. You do not have to wait till they're at cool to ambient temperature or anything of that nature. You can automatically start that autoclave rolling again. And so there's a big time savings factor in that. And, these are just really geared to be able to turn quickly. The economics of them, because it's a service model, we don't sell them. We take care of everything for the facilities. And it just really creates that for the heavy surgical hospitals, the sterile processing departments that are under a lot of pressure to turn a lot of sets, we just make that a lot easier.
All right, so I know that people have questions, but I wanted to shout out. I saw Sharon in there. I saw Arlene in there. So we have people watching. And that was just one of those. So from where we would normally have to check our filters, put our filters in, our locks, all of that kind of stuff, that's where that packaging prep time is saved, because now we're just flipping and hitting a button and it's telling us that the container is sealed per se.
Yeah, and I want to show you some, because you mentioned locks. So I do, there's one point. So I'm going to lift up that latch. We do allow for locks, by the way. So if you want to put plastic locks on these, we do allow. But the two checks are, I press this, I get the green check mark. The second one, you saw on the other one that was not sealed, how easy it was to lift that valve. I can't lift that valve.
Okay.
And now with both latches unlatched, this is a 25-pound set, not 25, maybe 23, 24. I can lift this whole thing up and it's not separating. So that's how strong that seal is. That's how reliable and robust it is, and yet easy to break the seal. We can show you that.
So I'm gonna say this, and I probably it's gonna be taboo, but if in fact we had locks on it and one of those locks broke, as long as that seal, you're telling me, as long as that seal is not compromised, that tray is still a good tray to use.
The only reason someone's using a lock is because a facility says we put locks on all of our rigid containers, and we don't want to not put locks on Zuno containers. But I tell you, Kenneth, if you had this and you get a green check mark and you can't lift this up, if you want to reject it because the plastic lock got knocked off, you can. But I think it's a bit crazy, because without question, the sterile barrier has not been compromised.
And for our IFU, it's the 2 check. We don't have that. Right.
But if you think about like a traditional rigid container, and I won't mention the brands, I don't need to. You guys all know who they are. But the fact is, I could open it up if it didn't have that plastic lock on, and I could then put it down and latch it again. And someone would never know, which is why they have to have the plastic locks.
Right.
But this container that I've got here that is not sealed, the only way to get this with a green check mark is to run it in a sterilizer. It's the only way. No other way to get that. So if you've got a green check mark and you can't lift that valve up, you can reject it if you want to for a 50-cent lock, but I wouldn't.
Interesting. Okay. So I think you alluded to this a little bit a few minutes ago. The autoclave cooling, it said it used to be 30 to 120 minutes. And on the Zuno model, why was that eliminated? Or how is that eliminated?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that. I mean, Aerienne, if you want to kind of kick in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in regards to the cooling time, so like Allan mentioned, currently with the porous barrier, for example, or after the cycle, the container or a current container or a wrap tray would need to cool to ambient temperature before you are able to handle it, because
Right.
you're risking the condensation from the cold, the hot. And with the Zuno container, because we don't have any porous barrier and it's completely vacuum sealed, there's no risk of condensation from going from hot to cold. So the time savings there is that it no longer needs to cool within the autoclave. You can pull it out, have it cool outside of the autoclave, right, in storage, for example, or on the way to the operating room, right, if we're really talking through efficiency. And in that case, you have the ability to then reload the autoclave because you're freeing up that space. Where with other containment systems, you'd be using anywhere from 30 minutes to up to 2 hours, depending on the type of load, cooling within that autoclave, and also really taking up that value space and time. So imagine what you would be able to do with just even one more load a day.
So I have two questions here. I saw stars, but this one is, I guess, alluding to what you just said there. CS Assist says, will this allow departments an extra few minutes to leave the container in the sterilizer post-cycle? You know how people crack the door and let it sit in there a few minutes and things like that. You just said they can pull it straight out, put it away in a cooling area. It'll be hot, but you can take it out, move those trays to a different area, not have to worry about condensation because there's no way for that to be compromised.
No, there is no porous barrier. So that risk of the condensation from the hot to cold has now been eliminated because of that vacuum seal, again, non-porous barrier.
Okay.
But so let me make sure I'm for CS Assist. I'm answering the question. If they were left, if they didn't get to them, let's say they were sitting in for 15 minutes, it's going to be fine. It's no problem. That's not going to cause any issues with our smart containers. They may miss the post-cycle indicator, so they may not see the flashing green check mark or the red X. What's easy to do is with a gloved hand, you can try to flip up the lid the valve in the same way, and it's very obvious. Or as well as once it's cooled a little bit, you can press the status indicator and see either a green check mark or a red X. So you can check it at any point in time. You can, if it stays in the sterilizer a bit long, that's no problem either. But the one possibility is you might miss the flashing indicator that automatically flashes, and then you have to manually press the button in order to see that.
And they said also that the locks can warp, so that you eliminate the plastic locks, because the locks can warp on the trays and things like that. So that eliminates that part. Yeah, if you want to use a lock, you can, but you don't have to, basically.
Correct.
I was going to save this one for later because I heard you mention it a little briefly, but Star says, how many uses can you get out of one container?
You just keep running it as much as you want to, multiple times a day if you can get them in. There's no limits on that side of it. So we provide them as a monthly rental fee, and it's up to us to make sure that they're all running. So we really want to have a very high touch service. So if somebody calls up and says, hey, we've got one that doesn't seem to be sealing, we just want to come in, replace it, give you a brand new one, and have you going. So there's no limitations on how many times you can run that. If you have 50 containers that you're renting, you're going to have 50 containers running all the time, and you can run them as much. And the beauty of it is the more that you run them, and if you can run them multiple times a day, your per cycle costs just keep going down and down. So you really want to be running them a lot. And we want you to be running them a lot. So.
Okay, I want to get into that no maintenance part, but we're going to do that right after this commercial.
Okay, sounds good.
Welcome back. Welcome back. As you saw, RST Automation, definitely check them out. As we talk about innovation, think about that innovation. It's a tray assembly station. And if you, like I said, watch the video, see how they can help you. Y'all are blowing my mind. People are in the comments and they're going crazy right now. I heard you say we can use them as much as we like. It's up to you to make sure that they're working. You said it's a monthly rental. What does that mean as far as no maintenance?
Aerienne, you want to
Oh,
touch on
yeah,
that?
absolutely. So when it comes to no maintenance, like Allan mentioned, this being a subscription service, our Zuno technicians will take care of everything when it comes to battery replacements, gasket checks, for example. If for some reason you're not getting a seal, that is going to fall on solely on Zuno and our Zuno technicians. High touch service is what we are going to be providing for our users and customers. And so we want to eliminate, our goal is to increase efficiency across multiple departments. And as part of that too is eliminating that maintenance piece. So we will be conducting very regularly scheduled checks, replacements again as needed, so that you can continue to do your job. Our job is to take care of you and make sure that you have the tools that you need to continue to do yours. So again, for that efficiency.
And Kenneth, on that point, it's not we come by when there's a problem. We'll actually, heavy surgical hospitals, we'd be there once a week, and I would say on the outside we'd be there once a month, even in some of the slower facilities at that point. So we want to be there regularly, make sure everything's running well, and it's the gasket check. If our gaskets aren't working properly, they're not going to seal. There is no, which is why, Aerienne had talked earlier about taking the subjectivity out of it. Everything has to work perfectly on a container to get that green check mark. And it's one of the reasons why a rental and no maintenance works best for that, because there's a lot of technology that makes that lid work the way that it does. And we don't want hospitals or sterile processing departments having to worry about that. We'll just take care of it for you.
I said she tried to throw a word in there that she tried to slide it in and act like I wasn't going to hear it, but she said battery. Anything like a battery that I know as a battery, batteries die. So
yes,
how did this battery that goes into a steam sterilizer not die? Like what is that about?
Well, so first of all, there's a very special chemistry that can manage the heat and hostile conditions of a sterilizer, and that's called a lithium thionyl chloride battery. Not a lithium ion or something like that would not work. So we use lithium thionyl chloride batteries. We have tested those over thousands and thousands of container cycles. They work very well. And typically a battery change, depending on use, would be about every 6 months. One of our reasons for our regular visits is so that we can actually know how many cycles have been run, where's the battery status, and we can replace it before you ever even have to contact us that there's one out of the battery. Also, I think an important thing that might pop up in the questions is, if we have to change the battery, it doesn't compromise the actual seal of the container. So if there was one in cooling and storage and we saw that, thought, it's a little bit on the low side, we'd like to replace it, we can replace it, and there will be no impact to the contents, no impact to the sterile barrier. And Rebecca, yes, the battery will withstand the cart washer. The entire system will withstand the cart washer.
Yeah, I heard you just say you can see how many cycles will run. Is that something that the container itself has a memory, or is that something we track as an end user?
No. You don't need to track it. We're able to detect that from within memory on that. We have a log for every cycle, everything that's run. We know anything that's going on within it.
See, I knew I was going to get into this. I knew it. In that life cycle, as I said, the existing process says it has the 8 steps, and Zuno broke that down to 5 steps. One of the next steps that I saw that I just wanted to bring up, it says, and we talked about it a little bit, but explain it to the people for a little bit more. Subjective barrier check versus objective barrier check. So what does that mean to the end user?
So going back to that sterile barrier check, like a subjective, you're relying on the individual to be able to make that call. And there can be a lot of gray area when it comes to whether or not to reject a set, right?
Okay.
Did the puncture go all the way? Depending facility to facility, individual to individual, like, did it go through both, barriers? Did it go through, is there a tear? Is there, okay, this tray is wet. Do I reject? And it's up to that individual to be able to make that call. So going about, again, even back to that stress of like, I'm going to call, the OR needs this set. I don't want to reprocess, there's a lot of that even internal struggle. And with the Zuno, having it be an objective, I mean, looking at that container, you're pressing a button. Is that are you getting a green check mark or a red X? It's black or white. It's yes or no. And we've completely eliminated that gray area to, again, like remove that stress, remove the guesswork, and then go from a subjective to an objective. So there's no argument as to whether or not it's not up for question whether or not the sterile barrier is intact.
And Kenneth, I'll add to that. Even when you're looking at traditional rigid containers, it's, is the retention plate still working effectively? Is it holding the filter up against, the valve and the vent that's there? Is it, and a lot, if it wasn't placed in properly, you don't really know that by looking at it in cooling and storage. So you're likely to take it up and then it's found in the OR. There's also an awful lot that, if there is a puncture or tear that aren't found, and there's certainly been studies kind of showing that, it's not foolproof to be able to detect it when there is a problem. And I guess, we haven't really explained how we get that green check mark. I mean, the fact is we have sensors in that control module that are monitoring pressure and temperature. And so it's looking at that low pressure when it's those valves dropped, and it's calculating algorithms to understand the changes in temperature and what that corresponding change in pressure should be to make sure that it hasn't been breached. And so once it's become, as long as it hasn't become breached and you don't have a significant change in that low pressure environment, that's what's going to decide whether we're going to illuminate a green check mark or a red X in that. And if it does breach a threshold, you'll get a red X, even if it might feel like the container still has a bit of a seal to it. And so that's the objective verification that's looking at. We're really looking at the science of pressure and temperature and what those were at when it exited the sterilizer, and then where they're at that moment in time.
All right. And then you check any location too, just to even like really hone in on that is, currently you're checking the sterile barrier in the operating room. And by the time you identify a problem, unfortunately, it can be too late. And so with the Zuno container, though, that barrier check, you have that yes or no indicator at any location, most importantly, as soon as it comes out of that autoclave.
So if my case card person is doing the case cards, as long as he gets a green check, he know that can go on his case card. That's basically what we're checking at any. Okay. So I was thinking about
you can even check it. You can even check it the night before, right? So you can actually start proactively being able to check it. And it takes really 2-3 seconds to check one set. It's not like lifting up a wrap set or whatever and trying to see, it's very quick to be able to be sure that everything we've got scheduled for tomorrow is good to go. I'm not going to have any problems with that.
So I was thinking about something because the inner tech in me won't let it go. You said that when it comes out, I mean, it's flashing, whatever. We got the green. We know that it met the parameters, and I can move that set, set it somewhere else to cool. Mm-hmm. Now, everything in me says the rule of thumb is, hey, don't set that tray on anything flat surface because it may condensate. If you take it and don't set it in the right area. So you're saying if I take that tray and I set it just over to the side, as long as I'm spitballing here, but if that cool area, if I set it on a flat surface, it still won't condensate because there's no way for the condensation to get inside.
So there's typically, let me talk through that because it's a very good point. And
I don't want to confuse the listeners
because if you had a table that was at 50 degrees Fahrenheit and you put it on there, is there a chance that you could see tiny little moisture beads that had condensated on that? Possibly. Generally, if cooling and storage is going to have a rack, right, and it's going to have ventilation, it will allow that to cool probably a bit more effectively. The one thing that we didn't kind of go through, though, is I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to see if I can give you a look off my bald head to see how big that gap is. It's a little bit tough to see here, but there's a really sizable unobstructed gap. Maybe there you can kind of see through the shirt.
Yes,
a little bit there. So if I take blue wrap, right? We all know how this kind of works, right? I've got tiny little pores that when they're heated, they expand a bit. That's still, I'm trying to push sterilant through during the sterilization cycle, and then I'm trying to extract it back out in the drying cycle. We have completely unobstructed pathway for sterilant to go in during the sterilization cycle and then get extracted back out during the drying cycle. And then we're closing the valves while it's still in a semi-vacuum state.
Okay.
And the physics of a vacuum means it's actually not able to retain water in that, kind of lack of air very well. So we're closing it. We're extracting the moisture quite a bit better, and then we're closing it at a time when the moisture is at a small level. That doesn't mean that you could run it in a 10-minute cycle and you're not going to see any at that point.
Right,
but it does mean that we do quite a good, thorough job of getting that moisture out of there. What sometimes you'll see, let's just say you set it on that cooled table, if you cracked it before it hit ambient temperature, you may see some of the moisture beads that I was mentioning on that side of it. But by the time it gets to ambient temperature, the minuscule amount of moisture that might be in there actually just gets re-vaporized, and it's just, it's not, you won't see any of that within it. It's more just like there's a touch of humidity inside the container. And that's, again, because we're extracting so much out of that, because we're not fighting to get it through the pores, if you will. We just got a free flow out of there.
No, I just wanted to make sure that part, because like I said, when we say we can move it and set it somewhere and let it cool, like to a tech that's been doing this a while, we always are taught, don't set it on a flat surface. Don't do this, don't do that, because it could condensate. You don't want to. So getting that so that people understood when you say it can be moved and just keep using the sterilizer, moving the trays. Yeah. Now I understand, and they can understand what you mean by that. Rebecca says, is there anywhere else besides prep and pack and sterilizer that these containers help SBD techs? Is there any process we should be aware of in decon? So with it being all this tech stuff, like, can it be soaked in the sink, or, if people are wiping it down, do they have to take special precautions and things like that?
We, so cart washer, the automated washer, manual cleaning too, of course, as well. I'd say, I think the first thing that stuck out to me too, when I read this question, is that, is there any other place in decon is, and, there's no, and we didn't really talk too much about the actual, design of the container, if you will. But as you saw, when Allan lifted up the lid, there's one thing that it doesn't have that you'll see with other containers, is the filter retention plates. So it's one less piece. There's no disassembly needed. So when you're doing in decon, right, it's the only disassembly is taking the lid off from the container. So there's no additional parts that you need to break down or, crack off, or
right.
any of the tweaking. So we are eliminating a couple additional parts that you would be used to now with your standard containers.
So one other thing I wanted to just mention, because this is a big wow factor, that is sometimes we don't often always mention it, because it's you work into the tech and the verifiable vacuum seal and that. But a lot of times what gets asked is, do these stack? And yes, they do. And so they can stack in cooling, and, no problem within that. They stay.
Wait. You just said they can stack while they're cooling?
Yes. Not in the sterilizer. Right? Okay. Now, the other thing, and this is a big one, is when they're not in use, the bases nest together.
Okay.
So I could stack these things 20, 30 high, and they're going to use the footprint of a single base.
Okay.
And so from a standpoint of like just we know that you guys all have space challenges, right? And so to know that I can take all of my bases and just nest them together and sit them neat and tidy when they're not being used or they're waiting for the cart washer or something of that nature. That's one we tend to get a lot of oohs and ahs when we're in both sterile processing and OR departments showing.
So I guess you answered most of those major ones that people would have about. Again, that's a good question by Rebecca, because I know that some people would say that it goes through the cart washer. Is there any kind of special precautions for because it's tech? Is there any kind of special precautions for the electronic components and stuff like that? You said that normal processing, whether it be washer, manual wash, cart washer, all that's the same. So we're not worried about that part. No filters. Don't have to necessarily use locks. And something else I saw here, it said the big one I saw was like you can alleviate some of that tension between the OR and CS, because when you on the case cart, or before it even makes it to the case cart, you're checking that barrier, you're making sure that it's good to go, because you get the green check. So there's no compromise of anything potentially going to the OR that has a compromised sterile barrier. There's no delay for process failures. Of course, she would ask that. Do they come in different colors? Like we want a color code, like I saw that. No, I know I know why they're asking that question, because there are service lines that change the lid color per service line. So do these offer any type of things like that? So your neuros are with neuro, ortho with ortho, and things like that.
We are not intending to change the lid color at all.
Okay.
What we are kind of working through is how can we potentially allow you to put like a something over the handle, so you could color code, like slip a clip over the handle that would be white or blue or red, or so that you could actually just look at the handle and know if it's a particular surgical category, if that's the way hospitals are organized.
We can also do the colored tags too. So there's room in the containers to put in a colored metal tag.
After this, I got a question about that, and then I'm gonna ask that question. So Knowledge and Nonsense says, is there condensation on the stack? Because you said that you can stack them to cool.
Correct.
Would there be any kind?
How
do you avoid condensation there?
Look, would I suggest cooling 5 stacked on one shelf? Not necessarily, but I think if they're all allowed to cool to ambient temperature, there should not be a problem in terms of condensation. If you had the room to put each of them on the shelf, a vented shelf itself, that's probably a better idea. But if you have, 2 or 3 stacked on top of each other and they are allowed to cool to ambient temperature, you really shouldn't see any moisture issues with that.
And I saw also that it's been validated for a 4 and 30.
We use that as our standard. We've run in hospitals with, and we're kind of making some modifications to the IFU to be able to show those more as minimums, because we've, the sensors and the algorithms in the control module allow you to run whatever level of cycle that you want to run. So however long the sterilization temp, and although it's not cleared for IUSS at this time, we do intend to get it cleared for IUSS, at a later point in time. Obviously, from that perspective, you're going to have quite a bit of moisture, because you're going to shorten the dry time a lot, and you're going to have quite a bit of moisture in the container, but the moisture will be under a vacuum seal. There's nothing that will be able to get into that. And your flash pans have, quite a bit of water and other things in that. We just kind of want to clear it for that, because we figure if you have one sitting there already, then, it's you may as well be able to use it for IUSFs if that type of circumstance arose.
Okay. And just to clarify, I know she said that we didn't go over the design that much, but on the container, do we still have the place for like them to put the cards and all that kind of stuff, or do y'all offer your own card? Because
No,
is it a different card?
so these are just the standard of the smaller size. We don't have the double height, but we do have the, of the single size, and the same cards or metal tags and stuff can slip in there, no problem.
And because of the way that the vacuum seal is, I'm assuming, because I didn't see the inside, there's no kind of seal or anything in the bottom of the pan.
Oh, you mean like a liner or anything of that nature? On that side
there's no kind of vacuums or anything in the bottom of the pan. It's just a solid base.
Correct. Yeah, the vent volume that we get of pulling that into the valves, the fact that there's no porous barrier, it's not required.
All right. So, all in all, I don't see. You know what? I'm gonna say it. So, when it comes out, I get my green check, and I know we had this conversation, so I want them to understand why I'm saying it. The green check, is that guaranteeing sterility?
It does not.
Okay.
So the green check gives you assurance that the sterile barrier has not been compromised.
Okay.
But whether it's sterile or not is up to the sterilizer itself, right? And the parameters and there's obviously a lot of verifications that each facility, runs through to be able to ensure that their sterilizer is running appropriately and sterilizing things. Okay. Those are still required. To tell you the truth, we could create one. We could have the green check mark show that. We felt that was a step too far for the industry in general, step too far for the FDA. And so we opted not to go to that stretch. Okay. It doesn't mean we may not sometime in the future. But right now, very important to note that green check mark does not assure sterility. That it does assure that the sterile barrier has been intact since it was in the autoclave and has remained intact ever since.
So, listeners, and I know that everybody's trying to figure out what the difference is. What he's saying is that you still would have to do all of your other verification checks, like your indicators and everything else that goes with that process. Your BI, your challenge device, whatever you're using, you still have to make sure that those things have been met. What the sterile barrier means is that when it gets to the OR, it is actually still intact to say that we know there's no holes because it's a container. We know that there's no holes in a filter, no compromise of a filter. Even in the case that you don't use locks, there's no locks to be checked and anything like that. So we still would have to do our other parameter checks to make sure that that cycle and the parameters of that has been met. The check just means that the barrier is intact. So that's the same as saying that you still have to make sure that the tray is clean so they can still use it. So just the same type of thing. You still have to go through your normal everyday processes. The tray just allows us to say, we know that there's not a compromised tray going to the OR. So trying to make sure that I did touch everything. Yeah. So that, I mean, I like it. Like, I actually want to see it in real time for myself. Just to say I've actually seen that process because it sounds very interesting, and just I want to see an OR's actual reaction to it when they're in the OR. And this is that part that I like. When they're in the OR and they have this tray in front of them, they can check the green check. How do they know that that barrier is not being compromised when they go to open it?
So there's the two checks can be done at any time that Aerienne talked about, right? So right. I'm pushing a button, I get a visual signal of that green check mark. I get the tactile feel of that valve being locked. And the third one is only done in the OR because it will compromise the set. So I'm gonna walk you through that kind of right now. So they're gonna press this button and the green check mark is gonna get displayed. They're gonna use a 1-finger test to try to see if I can lift that up, and I can't. And the other one's right next to me, so you can see how easy that one is. This one's not coming up. And so the last one, what they do is they're going to vent this. Now, I try to show it with two hands. People with big hands like myself can probably do this with one hand, but there's a tab on this valve here, and I'm just prying it up like I'm opening up a can of tennis balls or a can of pop. And so I'm just lifting it up like that, And I'm gonna shut up for a minute so you guys can hear this. So that audible signal is the third test. And what our IFU states, you need to see all three. If you don't see all three, reject the container.
Okay.
But when I say see all three, you need to experience all three. You need the visual identifier of the green check mark. You need the tactile feel of that. And then you need to hear that audible sound. And it's quite, especially, to be louder if you were here in person on that side of it. And just so that you see, it now has a red X, and I can now lift this up very easily.
I think that would have been the big one for like our partners to say, well, how do we know other than that? So yeah, when you go to hear it, you got to hear that pop. that sound is everything. So that was the important part when she was explaining it. I was like, yeah, I got to hear this. I need to hear this for myself. And there it goes right there. Yeah. So
the one thing I want to, because I see Star mentioning right colors is everything, and do they come in different colors? That Rebecca asked. We will definitely be through the handles, a mechanism on the handles. We will allow color coding for them. We're just not going to do it necessarily through anodizing all the lids in different colors and things of that nature. So we'll definitely have an option where you can take surgical categories and color code those in a way. So that will be a part of it. We know that's an important component. Just want to make sure they know that.
All right, family. Hey, look, I feel enlightened by this. I feel, intrigued by it. I think it is something that definitely, is going to be a game changer when, people actually get to see him. Vegas is coming. I saw that you got a booth. Will people be able to come by the booth and actually, feel and pop and hear all of these things for themselves? Because that's going to be what everybody wants to hear. I want to hear I want to hear that.
Yeah, so that one's tough though, because unless you're going to bring me a sterilizer in one that's running and working so I can reseal them, we're not going to hear the pop.
So I mean, I had to try to.
That's special to your show, Kenneth, because I'm sitting. There's a sterilizer about 50 feet away. It's not in a garage anymore, and I can go run it right there and get it going.
So I had to try it just so people could say, hey, maybe he'll bring the sterilizer that works. There's gonna be a whole bunch of sterilizers in the building, but we can't use those. So
yeah, exactly.
Definitely, everybody. Definitely let us know what you think. If you're at the conference, definitely go by the booth. They're gonna be in booth number 427. Definitely go check them out. See this for yourself. Game changing when it comes to efficiencies. Game changing when it comes to that OR-CS relationship. Is definitely one of those things that can start to see the trend in the right direction of the collaboration and working together, because y'all are both experiencing it in real time, with us hitting the check to make sure it's there. They're making sure the check is there. We're making sure there's no wiggle in the handle. They're making sure there's no wiggle in the handle. Like I said, seeing all three of those things definitely make it so that it gives them that extra sense of a surety. And that's what we're trying to do as well. Like, we're doing our best to, like you said, and now we're lifting trays up. We're looking at containers, trying to make sure we don't see a hole. But when they get it to the OR and open it, as she said, like, is it both? Is it through both layers? Is it a cut? Is it a tear? That subjectiveness that goes with them accepting the tray versus them knowing that a tray is ready. I think that is where you're going to get a lot of buy-in, because it will be that extra piece that gets that tension. Well, like you said like I said, I was on your website, and it says that y'all eliminated the tension between the OR and CS, and this will go a long way toward that. As I always ask everybody before they leave the show, I'll start with you, Aerienne. If you had any advice for a tech, a manager in this changing climate that we have with tech, with AI, and everybody nervous about AI, what advice do you give them as it comes to, as it pertains to embracing tech? I'll start with there, since this is a tech type show.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, that's a great question. I would say, I mean, I know this sounds cliche, but knowledge is power, right? I think learning as much as possible and understanding that, and like even taking the time out to learn about the new technologies and embrace and really try to see how new technologies may make your day to day just that much easier. That going back to like work smarter, not harder. And I think the more you know, and the more you can, find new technologies and embrace it and see what works best for you. But never stop learning, I guess, to sum up.
There she goes. She's embracing the tech, seeing how it can help you instead of looking at it as a negative, seeing where it can be a positive and helping you out. Allan, your question for people out there who may be young entrepreneurs or, I have this idea and I don't know what to do with it. What advice can you give them? Seeing as how I know, like I said, I was there. I was almost there for the beginning and seeing it now years later in reality. When people say that's a long time, I'll just give up. What kind of advice can you give somebody who has these ideas or is on that verge of that next thing, but just don't know what to do with that information?
This is a 2-hour show? Is that what? So, I mean, one, it's, I think one of the most important things is actually really understanding the need that you're solving.
Okay.
How important that need is. Because I think when it comes to tech, there's a lot of things that could be, it seems cool, but what value is it really providing? What's it change? What problem is it solving? What's changing? And fundamentally, if you're going to go raise money from investors to advance and move the idea forward, it has to be very clear that here's the problem that we're solving. Here's what it will mean to those people who are solving the problem and why they'll want it. And then there comes to like producing it. How much is it going to cost to produce it? Even if that's software or an app or anything like that. And then what are people going to pay for? How do you monetize that? And, the tough part about that is it's, you got to do a lot of legwork and a lot of groundwork and talk to a lot of people kind of on that. I mean, this product has evolved a tremendous amount, even by the conversations that we had at San Jose Regional, and then didn't know we were going to reconnect 4 years later in a podcast. But we got a lot of feedback to really understand ways that we could improve it, ways that we could make it better, ways that it could drive more value. And then I guess the other thing is you've got to be kind of doggedly persistent. Because inevitably you will come up with lots of problems and challenges and setbacks and things of that nature. And you have to be willing to kind of move mountains, traverse valleys, swim through rivers, whatever you need to do at that point to be able to, see it to fruition. And this has been a lot longer journey than I'd ever expected. The autoclave is a very hostile environment to run electronics in. And that's why when we talk about the automated washer is nothing next to that damn autoclave.
Right.
You can run in that. You can run in the automated washer at that point.
Right.
But we just kept at it. We believed in it. We're very passionate about it and the change that it can bring about. And so we've just kind of kept pounding away at it.
Family, there you have it. Innovation, staying with it. Yeah, I like doggedly persistent. I like that. You got to be, if you're into it, to be into it, and you know what it offers, not being afraid to put in that legwork. I heard you say it's the legwork, being out there talking to people, being out there accepting the triumphs, accepting the failures, and actually being persistent and keep going, never losing sight of what you're doing it for. I thank you both. Definitely, I will see you in Vegas. I'll come by, and touch the container, feel the container myself again. But I'm inviting everybody. If you're here and you've seen this and you want to see it for yourself, definitely go by the booth and talk to them in person and see the container. Ask the questions you didn't get to ask tonight, because that'll be important for any decision that you make. It may be something that you wanted to ask and you were thinking about it later. They're there for you. How else can they reach you, guys, if they had questions that they want to shoot you before we get to Vegas?
Great question. Our website, we actually just updated our website. You can contact us through that. Also info@zunomedical.com. I'm happy to give my personal email too. It's just first name @zunomedical.com.
Same as mine.
A little tricky to spell sometimes, but yeah. And
mine, you just have to remember to get 2 L's and an A. If you do one L, it's not going to work. But
not going to work. There
You
we
do
go.
as
We
well,
put
so
it, and we put it there for everybody, just so y'all can definitely reach out and contact them if you have any questions. Again, everything that we bring on here is always going to be, you know, you're going to have those ups, downs, and that's for you to talk to the vendor about and see how it can help you. Aerienne, thank you. Allan, definitely thank you. And I would definitely see y'all again. Family, it's been a time to talk innovation. It's been a time to talk about how we can make things efficient, how we can do things a little bit better to even work on relationships between the OR and CS with things like this, things that help both entities. Even though it's being introduced by us, it does help both sides with the stresses that go with being a processor as is and the work that we put in. This is just one more tool that'll help us get through a day where we're not getting frustrated, and you know how that goes when the OR is frustrated and CS is frustrated and everybody's at each other. This might be one of those things that helps us eliminate some of that because we're not worried about sending a tray upstairs that we have questions about or they may have questions about. Everybody, y'all know what this has been. Time to talk. I appreciate everybody. Definitely see y'all again very soon. Thank you for coming tonight. Family, same time, same place next week. Let's talk about it. Thank you so much. Y'all take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.